Hey, I'm glad you're here for our second week of a series that we started last week called Lost and Found. And what we're doing is we're looking at the context of relationships and what's been lost in them, and how do we find new things in them, new hope in them, new meaning in them, new purpose. And last week we talked a little bit about before you can have healthy relationships with others, you have to have a healthy relationship with yourself, who you are and whose you are, and understanding all of those contexts. But today what I want to do is I want to now focus more on the relationships that we encounter with other people. And I want to ask this question to you and to myself, to us as we get going. What would it take for you to flourish in those relationships? And you're like, Dan, that's an old word. What does flourish really even mean? It means this: to grow or to develop in a healthy or a vigorous way. Like, if you want to flourish in your relationships, you have to have a favorable environment. Now, here's what I will confess, I have done this before. I have wished away phases of my life, once my kids get out of diapers, then I can flourish. I've heard people say, once my kids stop sleeping in the bed with us because they're co-sleepers with my husband and I, then, or my wife and I, then we can be intimate with each other, but you can't be intimate with your spouse while your kid's sleeping in the bed. So once they get out of my bed, then we can flourish in our relationship. Once I get my kids through high school and out the door, then I will flourish. And then they come back, and once I can get my kids to finally leave the house, then we'll flourish in our relationship. If I could just date my spouse twice a year, then I would flourish. If I could just pay off my house and have no mortgage, and I have an extra $1,000 a month, then I would flourish. See, some of us wait till we have a favorable environment, and we wish away the favorable environment that we're in right now. We have a different view of what will allow us to flourish. Like, what would it take for you to flourish in your relationships with other people? And so what I want to do today is I want to talk about losing and finding. I want to talk about losing hurt that we might have in relationships and finding hope in them. But how in a world of hurt do we find this hope? Because we live in a culture of hurt. But we live in a culture of hurt because we've caused some of it ourselves. Let me unpack that for you. In the last 10 to 15 years, we have shifted from we to me. Self-fulfillment, self-gratification, self-serve, self-indulgence, self-pleasure, self-care. And so it's really hard to find hope when we've created a world, some of us created a world of hurt. So how do we find this? Well, I think we can find it in the Bible. I think the Bible is a good roadmap. I think one of the best ways to do that is to read the New Testament. In fact, if you were to read the New Testament alone, just Matthew through Revelation, what you're going to find is over 50 times there's this phrase, love one another. There's different variations of it. Encourage one another, build one another up, encourage them to grow. There's different variations, but it all comes from the same root. Love one another. You want to flourish in a relationship? Love them. But how do we love them in a world of hurt that they may have caused you, or you may have caused them, or you've caused each other? Because it's very normal right now to shred people, to cancel people, to annihilate people that don't vote like us, don't dress like us, don't think like us, don't go to church like us, they don't spend like us, they don't look or think or act or do anything like I do. It's really easy to shred them rather than to love them and encourage them and build them up. So how do we do this in a world of hurt? I want to unpack this for you. Luke chapter 6. Jesus gives us the handles for this. He gives us the insight. So in Luke 6, he's talking to a large group of people. But why is there a large group of people? Luke 3, 4, and 5 tell us why. Jesus is fresh on the scene in Luke chapter 6. He's not done many miracles yet. In fact, he's only done a couple up until this point, and I'm going to call them mini miracles. Now, any miracle is awesome, and I get that. But he has not walked on water yet. He's not fed the 5,000 plus, the 5,000 women, children as well, so 20 to 25,000. He's not done the massive miracles yet. All he's done, sounds a little sacrilegious. All he's done to this point is he's healed a man with leprosy and raised a paralyzed man. He's not even raised the dead yet. Like, he's not gone to the macro, he is in the micro. So there's large crowds following him and gathering around him, which is interesting to me because he's not done the massive things, but it tells me the one matters just as much as the many. And so you might be sitting here, and Pastor Don set this up brilliantly in his prayer and his welcome, that you don't matter. The one does. The very thing you're going through this morning matters so much to Jesus. So much. Well, Dan, it's small, it's macro, it's mini, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Before Jesus does these huge things, he focuses on one at a time. See, in Luke chapter 6, he's still gathering his disciples, those that are going to follow him and learn from him. And there's these crowds gathered around, and they're not even changed by him yet. They're just bewildered by him. They're not even necessarily inspired. They're just intrigued. What is this guy all about? And then he drops some very good nuggets of wisdom in Luke chapter 6. If you want to have a healthy relationship with other people, here it is. He's telling the crowd, listen, I'm going to say to you who hear me. If you're listening, just understand this. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. TV time out, hard pass. No thank you. Next. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, punch him back. Oh, wait, no, sorry, that's the Dan Mack version. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. From the one who takes your cloak, why don't you just turn to him and give him your tunic as well? If he takes your jacket, give him your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from the one who takes away your goods, don't even demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. Can we just stop for a second? This isn't inspiring, this is confusing. I heard a preacher years ago used to say this, let me into your kitchen for a minute. And when he would say that, I'm like, I don't even understand that phrase. So let me into your kitchen for a minute, because what he meant was the kitchen is a safe area. It's a common place. You gather around for food. You gather around for comfort. You gather around for conversation. So let me into your kitchen to unpack this just for a second, and then we'll keep going. Because the context for the Jewish people, for the audience, when he says love your enemy, he's talking about the evil empire Rome. And as the Romans came in and overtook and tried to rule the Jews and oppress the Jews, I'll just be very candid with you. They would come in and they would tax them. They would abuse them. They would steal from them. If they saw something or someone that they liked, they would take it. And if you dared fight back, you would die. Think about the context for a second. Love your enemies. No, Jesus is telling them, the very people who are raping your wives and your children, love them. Hard pass. The very people who are robbing you blind so they can get rich, pray for them. Love them. Hard pass. The very people who are coming into your culture and bringing their pagan gods and their pagan idols and worshiping them and forcing their ideologies and indecencies into the culture so that they become normal, everyday part of your life, bless them. That's their culture. You want to know what it translates for us today in what I would call our current context? Love and pray for those who affirm abortion if you don't. Love and pray for those who affirm gender neutrality. Love and pray for those who identify as non-binary. I'm in your kitchen. I get it. That's the current context for today. We're not being overtaken by the Romans. There isn't an ideology and an agenda that's being pushed on us. And Jesus says, if you want to have healthy relationships with people who don't think like you, act like you, dress like you, vote like you, spend like you, pray for them. Bless them. Encourage them. Build them up. This is so contrary to what we think. When was the last time you prayed for this administration and all the taxes that they've given us? And if you're on the other side of the fence and you're a Democrat and you hate the Republicans, when was the last time you prayed for the Republican? This goes both ways. Bless those who tax you. Hard pass. Because we get taxed on everything. You buy a house, you're taxed. You sell the same house, you're taxed. You buy a piece of property, you're taxed. You buy some gas, you're taxed. You buy the car to spend the gas, you're taxed. You're taxed on everything. And you want me to bless those people? And pray for those who have hurt you. I'll pray they get gonorrhea. I'm not going to pray for people who hurt me. Are you kidding me, Jesus? Stick to your notes, Dan. Sorry, that was mildly inappropriate. I apologize. Ish. Because you think it. I just say it. That's the problem. Don't give Dan a microphone today. But the current context, we read it from Jesus and we're like, yeah, that sounds good. But when we apply it to ourselves, this is so hard. Love your enemies. And if I'm in that crowd, I'm going, where's the Jesus who healed the paralyzed man? I want him back. Where's the Jesus who saw the guy that had a little bit of a need because he had some skin issues and healed him? Where's that guy? Where's the Jesus that's like, hey, you know what? You're being oppressed by the Romans. Let me just smite them and wipe them all out for you. Where's that Jesus? I want that Jesus, because I'm going to tell you, I'll be very honest, I have long struggled with this verse. You want me to pray for and bless the people who have rejected me, abandoned me, caused me loneliness and betrayal, the hurt of pain, blindsided me, abused me, stole from me, wronged from me, tried to destroy me. That's not the real world, Jesus. You're living in a fairy tale. And I would venture to say that I'm not alone. That there's some sitting here who have such deep wounds from somebody or something that happened to you. And Jesus says, if you want to learn how to flourish in your relationships that you're in, you're going to have to pray for those people. And love those people. Just because I love someone that disagrees with me doesn't mean I agree with what they stand for. Then he says this, if you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? Even sinners do that. I'm like, well, that's normal. I love people who love me. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? That's how the world works. That's transactional love. I give something to you and you give something to me. I help you and then you help me. That's transactional love. That's how the real world works, Jesus. Even sinners do that. And if you lend from someone who is going to, give back to you, and you want that something back and you expect to receive it, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and expect to get the same thing back. But love your enemies. You know why he uses that phrase again? Because it's not natural for us to do this. Love your enemies, lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great. And then you will be sons of the Most High. You'll be daughters of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful, and he is kind to the evil. And so be merciful as your Father is merciful. I don't like that verse. Love your enemies. See, the reason I don't like that verse is because it's not a natural thing for me to do. You know what I mean? There are things that are natural in your life, like there's things that are natural in my life. Like, I'm not bragging, I'm pretty athletic. I could pick up a sport and play it. I'm just gifted at that. If you gave me an oil filter and an oil can and a car that needed its oil changed, you're dead. Your car's going to blow up. I don't know how to do that. I'm not gifted with that. I can hear a song and I can go to the piano and play it, or I can pick up my guitar and play it. If you asked me to draw something that looked like anything, or I would die, just pull the trigger. I'm toast. I can't draw to save my life. There are things that are natural for us and the things that are unnatural. Now, I'm going to give you one more because it's kind of funny. I lead worship sometimes, as you know, and so you would think that I would be gifted with lyrics. No. Lyrics are the most unnatural thing to me ever. If I didn't have the cheat screen at the back, who knows what we'd be singing? Let me give you a little taste. About 15 years ago, we were singing a song. I was leading worship, a couple hundred people. It's an older song, obviously. It's 15 years ago. But the song is a song called You Are God Alone. Verse 2 starts like this. You are not a God created by human hands. Great song. Church is singing. I get up, belt it out. Verse 2. This is what's supposed to be sung. This is what Dan sung. You're the only God created. Oh no. By human hand. It was awful. The church is belting out this, and the pastor's just spewing blasphemy. Because lyrics don't come natural to me for some reason. It's a funny moment for Dan. The church was like, who's leading us? Why is he saying that you are the only God created by him? But that's what happened. Because here's the deal. For some of us, there are unnatural things. And I would venture to say this is one of them that we would find in common. Love your enemies. This is not natural for us. Lend and expect nothing in return. If I lend you something, I'm hoping I get that back. And Jesus is saying, if you're going to give, don't give hoping to get something in return. You give out of love. You lend out of love. You serve out of love. You share out of love. Be merciful. And then he drops the bomb where he says, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. And what we don't like to do as Christians, especially Christians who have been in the church a long time, we don't like to think of us in this context. I'm not evil. I'm not like that. But if you read Romans 5:8, God showed you his love, that while you were still sinning, while you were still separated, you were evil, I was evil, he had to send a Savior for you. But we've been going to church a long time, so what we don't do is we don't put ourselves in this context that the sinful nature is always hostile towards God. Well, they are, I'm not. It never did obey God's laws, and it never will. Apart from God, you can never obey God's will. That's why those who are still under the control of their sinful nature or the flesh can never please God. And we're like, well, Dan, I agree with that about them. I'm not as bad as them. Because before I knew Christ, I wasn't that bad. I wasn't like out partying and getting drunk and sleeping around and gambling my life savings away. I wasn't causing a ruckus. They were. I wasn't, though. That apart from Jesus, none of us can please God. No matter how good you think you are, you can't please God apart from Jesus. And so what Jesus is teaching the crowd, and what I think he's teaching us this morning, is we have to move from a transactional love to a transformational love. I'm just going to tell you, this is really easy. This is costly. A transformational love, that we love people and serve people and share with people and give to people and want the best for people who don't agree with us. This is costly. And because we don't get anything in return often, we quit, we bail on it. And we love those who love us. And we only give and serve those who give and serve us. And what's interesting for me is, if I can come back into your kitchen just for a minute, is 100 years ago, we all had a common enemy. I wasn't alive. I don't think anybody in the room was alive 100 years ago. Maybe you were. But it was Hitler. It was Nazi. It was Germany. That was the common enemy. 22 years ago, we had a common enemy. Osama bin Laden. We rallied around. This was our common enemy. Heck, 10 years ago, we had a common enemy, ISIS. Watching what they were doing, and just, it was brutal, and we hated. That was our enemy. You know who our enemy is now? Anybody that doesn't agree with you has become enemy. And it's become a transactional love. You need to agree with me, or I can't love you. In the Wesleyan Church, When a pastor is called to a church or invited to a church, there's a vote at a church. So 2.5 years ago, whatever it was now, we came to this church and I preached. It's an interesting system because you hear me for 30 minutes, you meet me for 45 seconds, and then you decide the fate of my family. It's a really messed up system, but I guess it's tradition, so we keep doing it. I'm not 100% sure why we do it this way, but we do. And we had a meet and greet. If you were here, we had a meet and greet in the basement after, and each person got to talk to my wife and I for about 45 seconds. And a gentleman came up to me during this meet and greet, and he asked me this question. He said, I'm a member here and my vote counts. And I want to know if you're going to preach Sunday mornings about entire sanctification and the Arminian doctrine of prevenient grace and conditional election. And I did that, Gary. Those are big conversations. And that's what they are to me, sir. They're conversations. They're not a message. Because when I preach a message, I want people to walk away going, I can do this. I can be a better husband or a better wife, a better parent. I can pray more. I can grow in my faith. I can take the next step on the Spirit. That's what I want for people. And he looked me dead in the eyes and he said this, then you don't get my vote. You see, in an instant, because I didn't align with him and give him what he wanted, I had become his enemy. He didn't vote for me. I wasn't hurt by that. I don't care. Because I need transformational love. Just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I hate you. I disagree with all sorts of people on different topics and still have a good connection or good relationship with them. And I think that's what's wrong, or one of the things that's wrong with our world right now is this thought, if you're not with me, then you must be against me. No, or we just think differently. And that's okay. And in the context of relationships, what's happened is the people who were supposed to be with us, our ride or die crew, the family, the posse, as we used to say back in the 90s. That's my posse. They have just abandoned us because we have a different opinion. And that's all it is an opinion. And it's become transactional rather than transformational. So how do we find hope? How do we find hope in a hurt world and hurt relationships? I want to give you one simple, practical handle on this. Choose to honor and resist entitlement. Choose to honor people and resist entitlement. Honor means this: I am here for you. Entitlement is you're here for me. Parents, if you want to honor your children, remind yourself that as a parent, you are here for them, to help them, to grow them up. I'm here for you, son. I'm here for you, daughter. You want to lose the relationship with your kids? You're here for me. You serve me. I need you to go do that, get this, wear that, watch this. You're here to serve me. Spouses, you want to have a better relationship with each other? Choose to honor, outgive, outlove, outserve, outpray, outbless your spouse. Honor them. In your workplace, you want to have better relationships with your coworkers? Choose to honor them. I'm here for you. No, you're here for me. But Dan, you don't understand. Like, my coworkers are snakes. They get all the breaks. They take my ideas and then they get the rewards and the advancements and the credit. They steal my ideas. Yeah, and you still choose to honor them. This is hard. This is one of those messages where you're like, can I just record this, press play so that I don't get all the death glares from people, Jesus? And the answer is no, you've got to share it. And you're like, well, I can't honor those people. Actually, we can. And above all, if all else fails, we choose to honor because they're a son or a daughter of God. If all else fails, we choose to honor because they, just like you, are a son or a daughter of Almighty God. See, honor is about giving. Honor is about how we talk to others and how we talk about others. Honor is about taking other people's thoughts and feelings and emotions into consideration while making a decision. That's honoring. Honoring is saying, listen, I'm going to give you priority status. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to know what you're thinking right now. Let's work together. Honor happens when we look to the interest of others, not just that of ourselves. And in our culture, in our communities, even in our families, what we've done is we've found entitlement and we've lost honor. And we need to lose entitlement and find honor. You're like, well, Dan, I don't really know. You're like, entitlement, that's a big word. Entitlement, well, no, entitlement is just this, a hyper-awareness of our rights. Entitlement is simply this, thinking I deserve privileges or special treatment. Now listen, I'm going to say something and you're going to think I'm crazy. I love America. I have no plans to move back to Canada unless I'm deported for some reason. Green card is running close to being up, so if you got a spare prayer, chuck that one up. Haven't got the renewal yet. Just pray for that one. Or if you don't want us here, pray that we don't get it. Whatever suits you. Okay, whatever. Again, don't give Dan a microphone today. Entitlement. But you know what it's taught from a young age in our country? And I call it ours because I've been here for 22 years. We're taught entitlement because we're the land of the what? I can do what I want. I can say what I want. I can spend how I want. I can make my money how I want. And I can go where I want. And I can offend who I want. Because I live in the land of the free. And what we've done is we've grown up and we've raised ourselves and our kids and our culture up to think we can do and live and be anything and however we want. And to a certain extent, we can. The sky's the limit. That's the American dream. And yet, if you think about God's currency, God's country, the first will be last and the last will be first. It's a flipped economy. It's a flipped way of thinking. You first, me second. And this is so hard for us. Entitlement. Now, we're all entitled to a little entitlement. We're all entitled to some safety. We're all entitled to some security, some food, some shelter. But just real quick, let me tell you where I see entitlement play out the best. At the airport. If you've ever flown, I'll pray for you because it's challenging. If you've never flown, I hope you do sometime so you can watch entitlement. Because there's three classes of people. There's the first class. They've paid extra for their cookie first. That's what they did. They paid $300 more so that they could have the first dibs on the cookie and the cocktail. Then there's the second class people who wish they could pay more, but they can't afford to, so they paid $30 more so they could have the exit row. Then there's the back of the bus people. That's me. Way back there. And for some reason, the airlines put the first class on first, which makes no logistical sense. They should put us back of the bussers first so that we don't block the aisle. But if you've ever flown and you've got your backpack on and you're walking in and you have to stop in first class and wait for the back of the bus, boy, do they look at you like, get out of my space. You don't belong here. You're right, sir, I don't. I belong back by the toilet. And if you don't drink all that Pepsi, I might get the dribbles at the back when they come to me. Send me your crumbs. Like there's just entitlement in the first class. And then you get into the coach class and you're waiting and waiting. And then there's the people who are like, man, I wish I could be up there, but you're not even here. Get to the back. And if you want to really love Jesus, you pray for the people who are in first class. You honor them. That's true Christianity. And yet, I was flying a while back, and I was standing there looking at the person in first class while they ate their cookies first. And I thought to myself, if you bled, you would bleed red, just like me. And you put your pants on, just like me. And you chew your food, just like me. What makes you more entitled than me? Yeah, you got more money in your bank account. What makes the person who has a difference of opinion less than you? It's entitlement. And Jesus says if you want to honor others, you got to lose your entitlement. Now listen, I'll give you a little hint. You're like, Dan, I'm not entitled. They are, but I'm not. If you want to know where, not if you want to know where you're entitled, ask yourself, what do I complain about? Ask yourself that. It's like, in my 22 years of church ministry, I will give you church entitlement. Here they are. There's not enough hymns. The complaint is there not enough hymns. The entitlement is, I deserve more than you're giving me, Dan. It's too cold in here. The complaint, my comfort's more important than the comfort of those around me. It's too loud in here. Translate to my preferred volume level is more important to everybody else's preferred volume level. I'm not getting fed. Translate, I don't care about what they need. Pastor, I need you to feed me and only me on my level of growth. Now, we're not talking about this church. We're talking about other churches. None of you would dare say any of those things. But if you want to know where you're entitled, run a 48-hour test. Anything you complain about, filter it. Why am I complaining? Is it because I thought I deserved something that I didn't get? Because 90+% of the time, we do feel entitled. And you're like, well, it's not in me. Yes, it is. If you say things like, man, they should have. They never. Why does she always? Can you believe him? All the time, that's entitlement. You feel like you deserve something that you're not getting from them. In fact, if you read James chapter 4, he even says this. What causes this? It comes from this battle within you. You want something, you don't get it, and so you kill. And you're like, Dan, I've never killed anybody. Maybe not physically, but you've killed them with silent treatment. You've killed them verbally. You've annihilated them verbally. You've killed them with your actions or your inactions. You didn't get what you wanted, so you darn make sure they don't get what they wanted. See, what would happen if we followed the words of Jesus and we began to love our enemies and we said, I'm here to honor you. I am here for you. And I'm going to resist entitlement. Like, you're here to serve me. I think our relationships would change. The posture of the relationship would change. You know what's interesting is Jesus isn't even immune to this. Think about the conversations that Jesus had with the disciples. It was always this word. Never once did any of the disciples go to Jesus and say, can I just ask you, how did you change that water into wine? That one's got me baffled. Lazarus was gonzo for 4 days, and how did you do that? You know what they said? Hey, Jesus, when you die, R.I.P., who's going to sit at your right hand? It'll be me. Hey, when you go into glory, can I go first with you? Forget those other schleps. Pick me. He is not immune to our entitlement. He has witnessed this from the get-go. But if you want to have a better relationship with your spouse, with your kids, with your parents, with your family, with your co-workers, with your pastor, with others, choose to honor them and resist entitlement. In your marriage, are you honoring or feeling entitled? In your friendships, are you honoring or are you feeling entitled? But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. I want to just kind of turn towards the end of the message, and I want to quote an old school guy named Newton. You might have heard of him, and you might even have heard of Newton's third law of motion. It's this: for every action in nature, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. This isn't new. You've heard this before. You know this. You might have studied this. This might be right up your alley. You might never heard of this. You're like, what does this mean? This simply means this: for everything that happens in your life, you respond equally or opposite. Now, let's talk about it in the context of relationships, because every relationship will go under pressure. And how you respond, you will respond equally, and you will add fuel to the fire, and you will add anger to that. The conflict's heating up. Sparks are flying. I don't mean romantically. Like there's tension, there's pressure. This is uncomfortable, and I hate this. And you have an equal reaction or an opposite reaction. The choice is yours, and nobody else can make it for you. And so if you want to pour out kindness, that's the opposite reaction. If you want to pour out hope, if you want to pour out peace, you have to choose to do those things, because you know what's natural? This bad boy right here. With our anger, with our words, with our thoughts, with our grudge. And if you've ever poured fuel, even just a little bit of fuel to a fire, boy, does it burn hot and burn quick. And that's the reality in relationships. If you add just a drip of this to a spark, it goes. Now, us Christians, this is what we think. I might do that, but I only do it a little bit. I'm really good at dousing it with kindness and hope and a posture of a better attitude. You know what us Christians typically do? We think we're this. But we're really this. I was going to buy a smaller one, but I didn't want to offend people. I was like, I had a thimble. I'm like, because we have this concept in our mind, or idea in our mind that no, I'm not that. They are, but not me. This is me. If I gossip, it's only a little. If I only hate me, it's because they hated me first. And we want this picture of ourselves, but this is probably a little bit more accurate for most of us. Because for everything that happens, every conversation that happens, every pressure that happens, every challenge that happens, there is an equal reaction and an opposite reaction. The question is, and I can't wrestle it down for you, just like you can't wrestle it down for me, is which one are we going to be? One of my favorite verses, I have a couple favorite verses. One of them is Romans 12:18. It says this: if it's possible, because it's not always possible. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everybody. There are times where it's not possible to live at peace with people, and you remove yourself from the relationship. You know what I love about this verse? This verse frees me up from being controlled by anybody else. I'm not responsible for how they react, how you react, how my wife reacts, how my kids. I'm responsible for me. So as best I can, I have to be responsible for my actions, my words, my behavior, and live at peace with everybody.